Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esther Cathcart and I am your host today for this webinar. I'd like to welcome Jess Colquhoun, who will be our presenter on this very important topic of how to master your spend and build an emergency fund. Before we do get started though, Jess, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you like throughout the presentation by using this Q&A box, and we have left some time at the end of the presentation to answer as many as we can. Okay, well, let's get started. How to master your spend and build an emergency fund. Welcome, Jess Colquhoun.
Thank you very much, Esther, and thank you to all of you who have joined us today. So we're living in very uncertain times at the moment, and I know there's going to be a lot of you that may be affected by COVID-19, whether it's job loss, being on job seeker or job keeper payments, or maybe just having some uncertainty of your job security in the future. So this is a very timely webinar where we hope to be able to give you some key takeaways on how you can master your money, making the most of it for you guys, and how you can better prepare for what might be happening for you in the future. So a bit of context as to why I'm here today. A majority of my career was within financial planning, where I put together personal insurance recommendations for families, businesses, those type of things. Part of those recommendations was income protection. So I would put income protection to protect my clients in the event they were sick or injured and couldn't work. Part of having income protection means that you have a waiting period. So you've got to wait 30, 60 or 90 days before you can actually start receiving those funds. More often than not, I had clients who were unable to help make their own expenses during those waiting periods. So what they were having to do until the policy started paying was having to put things on credit or borrow from friends and family. So it wasn't an ideal situation. So they didn't have that emergency fund or those funds up their sleeves to see them through that financial shock or that experience. Part of my own personal journey is that a couple of years ago, me and my husband and family, we set off on our own financial wellbeing journey. We got sick of not having, enough cash to meet bills, or we were spending in the wrong places. We had personal loans and credit cards, and it just felt like our money was going nowhere. So we set on the task of saving for a rainy day, making sure we paid down debt and preparing ourselves. Now, what's important about this is that my husband works for Virgin, so you can understand that we're going through that financial uncertainty. But because we've done the work and put the foundations in place for ourselves, we're not feeling too stressed by that because we have our emergency fund to see us through, and we know that we're going to be okay and be able to weather the storm. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how you can set yourself up to build your own emergency fund and make sure you're using your money so that you can get what it's worth for your family. Before we do begin, we do have to let you know of the general advice warning. So everything that I'm talking about is general in nature. I don't know your personal circumstances, so make sure you get professional advice before you put anything into play that we're talking about this year. It's all general in nature. So let's have a look at a few of the aspects of what might influence your behaviours around money. Now, we've all grown up in different families in different areas, maybe even different countries. You might have come from a family that didn't have a lot of funds, so you always felt that your family was living paycheck to paycheck, or your family lived in a family of high financial stress. So those behaviours and the way that you may treat your own money may be reflected from your experience. You might have lived in a family that didn't talk about money whatsoever, so it was one of those taboo topics. So your experience with being able to manage your own money and what you should do with it was limited, and you felt stressed about money. Or you may have grown up in a family that was really quite open about money, talked about savings, set you up with all the skills to be able to understand money and all your responsibilities, and you felt well equipped for that. So that can kind of colour your vision with how you go to money, but it also can work in the reverse. If you lived in a family that was really tight around money, you might actually go towards more of a spender disposition because you felt like you weren't able to spend a lot of money when you were in your younger years. You might also be a saver disposition because those habits that your parents built for you actually were instilled with you, and you have good money habits. And usually, naturally, we'll always err towards one side or the other. So we'll be a spender or a saver. Our environment is also keeping up with the Joneses. So we live in a social media world where we see everyone's highlight reel, their holidays, their spends, their renovations, and we do have a real keeping up with the Joneses attitude, but it's much more in our face now. We can seek it out and it's there. So we also need to think about what sort of economy we're living in as well. So we're living in a buy now, pay later economy. So you'll always see when you go to make a purchase, you have the option to defer that payment to another day, which means that we're setting up these debts that don't feel like debts, but they are debts, which affects our capacity to use our money and plan properly. So let's look at why this is actually a problem. Let's look at a few of the statistics around, what's happening. Well, 25% of Australians are unable to pay their bills when they get the final reminder. So we're looking at households of high financial stress. 36% of Australians are struggling or identifying as just getting by. So a lot of households aren't thriving financially. They just feel like they're getting to the bare minimum and they're unable to save towards other goals, or they're stressed about, being able to make ends meet or having those financial shocks happen to them. 49% of us have less than $10,000 worth of savings. And you might think $10,000 sounds pretty good. But when you think about the average cost of household expenses being around $6,000 a month, that $10,000 is not going to go too far if someone loses their job or some other financial shock actually happens. The other more sobering fact is less than 25% of us have $1,000 in savings. So you can see what's actually happening to our households and why there may be high levels of household debt or stress. And that's what we want to talk about, is taking control of those type of things. So let's talk about what an emergency fund actually is. So an emergency fund is for that proverbial rainy day. It's a pool of money that you save up for those emergencies. So things like if a family member was to pass away and you need to go interstate for their funeral. I know COVID is putting some challenges around those type of things, but also the airfares are much more expensive. So if you didn't have funds to pay for that unforeseen event, then you're going to be putting it on credit card or borrowing from friends and family. Your emergency fund, if you build it, can be used for these type of things. Things like you might go to the dentist to have your crown removed and you've got your private health insurance, but your dental work is going to cost $1,200 and your private health is only giving you $250 towards it. Where are you going to find those funds? That's what an emergency fund is for. It's especially for unemployment. So say you lose your job and you need to keep continuing to meet your household expenses, your rent, your mortgages. An emergency fund can help with those expenses. So it's for that rainy day, for those things that are genuine emergencies. So what do we do? How do we start? Well, you make the first deposit. So you might be receiving a tax refund. You might be receiving some other, a bonus which you weren't expecting. Maybe you can start using that as your first deposit towards your emergency fund. Otherwise, it's starting to save towards that first $1,000. If you have zero in your emergency fund, the first port of call is that $1,000. We don't want to get too overwhelmed with what we should have, but making a start is what I'm trying to encourage you to do. So how much should you have? It's around 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And when I talk about expenses, we're talking about the necessities, the things that you need to keep covered to keep your household running, your lights on, and everyone fed and well. So how do we actually start? How do we find the money to start building towards an emergency fund? Well, let's have a look at some steps that we can actually look at. So there is no silver bullet towards an emergency fund. It is exactly that, building a budget. So it sounds boring, but it is the way, and it is the key to you not only building an emergency fund, but building onto other goals, such as paying down debt or saving for something else. First port of call should always be the emergency fund. So number one, you've got to determine how much income you actually have coming into the household. How much do you get paid? How much does your partner get paid? Is there any other sources of income? How much do I have? In order to do this, you need a tool to be able to start your budget. So it might just be as simple as pen and paper. It might be a spreadsheet on an app. So you can go to a website which has a budget spreadsheet that you can use. You might have an app that you like using, such as Pocketbook or Follow or something like that. Whatever your jazz is, you need to start writing it down. So determine what you've got coming into the household. What have you got to use towards expenses? The next step is have a calculation of what your expenses are. What do you need to include in your budget to make sure the school fees are paid, the rent, the mortgage is paid, the food is paid, and all of your necessary bills? So you might do those first two steps and say, okay, I've got $5,000 worth of income coming in. I've got $4,000 worth of set fixed expenses. So I should be able to save at least $1,000, but you're not. So where is that money actually going? And that's where the third step actually comes in. Review your spending and be honest about it. Get your statements out. See where you're making all those little purchases. See where your money is going. How many subscription services do you have? How much are you spending on extracurricular sport? How much are you spending on eating out? Be honest and add them back in. You've also got to think about what's important in that non-essential spend, because keeping the fun in your budget is key to being able to budget and keep it sustainable and keep you motivated towards doing it. So if, like me, much to my husband's dislike, getting my hair done every 6 to 8 weeks is what I like to do. So I fit that into my budget and make sure that I keep that fun and keep that treat for myself. So it's not about cutting everything out, it's making it work for you so that you can meet all your goals. Once you can see where you can cut back on that non-essential spending, you then need to automate saving towards your emergency fund, just like any other bill you pay. So you redeploy those savings you can find in your budget towards building your emergency fund and meeting that first $1,000. So let's look at the key to actually looking at these two areas. So your non-critical spending or your critical spending. So let's have a look at what these actually mean. So critical spending. Critical spending is those things. So your mortgages, your rates, your car payments and your debt payments. They are critical because we want to make sure they're paid so that you can keep a roof over your head and that you don't default on any loans. Things like your personal insurances. Now, a lot of the time when financial stress happens, insurances are the first thing to go out of people's budgets. But what I want to stress is about keeping these in your essential budget. When you think about it, if you have a car accident or your house does have a fire, an emergency fund doesn't have enough funds to pay for those financial shocks. That's where insurance can pay for those bigger events. Your life insurances are important as well. So if you have a main income owner in the household and they were to pass away, an emergency fund isn't going to be adequate to replace their income in the household while you adjust to a new normal. So instead of cutting out altogether, to keep them in your budget, if you're going through financial stress, see if you can reduce, see if you can try and meet them in there somewhere. Other areas of critical spending are your electricity, your water, your heating, your food. And we know these bills come in 6 monthly, quarterly, so you need to build them into your budget and make it work for you. Saving towards it as your pay cycle goes. So making those bills and saving towards them and setting up sinking funds, which is just another fund for that bill, making sure you're adding them, taking them out of your pays so that when the bill actually comes around, you're anticipating it and you've saved towards it. That's ideally what we want you to do so that you don't have that bill shock happening to you. Other areas of critical spending is your car maintenance, your petrol and your transport, making sure you can get to work to make the money and making sure you maintain your car so that it doesn't cause an emergency fund dip-in event such as the alternator or something like that. Now the crux of the issue and where you can find a lot of your money is in your non-critical spending. So let's have a look at non-critical spending. So non-critical spending is not about saying don't do non-critical spending, but you have to make your choices and your priorities in order to meet other goals and have a sense of financial security. So your non-critical spending, like your clothing, your shoes, your cosmetics, how much mindless spending are you doing on that? What portions of that are important to you that you want to put into your budget and make sure you keep the fun in there? How much are you eating out? How many times per week are you doing Uber Eats? I know we've got to stimulate the economy and we've got to get out there and support small business, but we also need to support our budget and make sure that we're doing that, but also meeting our own goals and keeping our household safe as well. So if you are Uber eating it every week, maybe you want to make it once a month, and then automatically you have some savings that you can redeploy to your emergency fund. How much extra grocery trips are you doing by not meal planning? So how many times are you going to Coles every afternoon and getting those extras? Do you have a gym membership that you're not actually going to the gym for? Maybe you need to make the choice and cancel it, save that money and do something at home instead. How many subscriptions do you have? Do you have all 4? Do you have Disney Plus? Do you have Netflix? Do you have Stan? And do you have Amazon Prime? That can cost you over $60 a month just in subscription fees. So if you chose to cut back to 2 and keep the fun in your budget, you could be saving at least $30 a month just on choosing which subscriptions you're actually using. So in order to make this a little bit easier for you to understand, we've put together this pledge, which is Mastering My Spending Pledge. Mastering My Finances Pledge. Now it's a threefold thing that we've put together for you guys, because when it comes to budgeting, it has so many more dimensions to it. It's about looking at your finances, making the choices and assessing them, but it's also about building good habits, and it's also about building your resilience and your behaviours towards it. So let's look at the first category, which is I get the best deal by. So you can get the best deal by reviewing your utilities and usage. How long has it been since you reviewed your power plan and who your provider is with? Have a look around. Is there a better deal? Are you on the right tariffs? Are you getting the discounts that should be applied to your electricity bill? Once you get that quarterly bill, have a look at it. What's your usage like? Can you reduce it in order to save more money? And when you save money on that bill, you can redeploy those savings towards your emergency fund. Water usage is a little bit harder to look at better deals because you have the one provider, but you can get control of your usage. How much water are you using? How often are your kids leaving the taps on? Can we change the habits in our family to save money? And little by little you can. All of it's about having money in your pocket. How long have you been with your internet and phone provider? Have you looked at other deals? Is it gone into the too hard basket because you've never actually done it? Can you actually save, $20, $30 a month by actually looking at your plan and seeing whether there's a better deal out there? Other areas that we can look at is reviewing your personal insurances. So how often have you got that renewal in the mail, said, yep, insurance is renewed, and it goes into the mail pile to be shredded 2 years later? What about next time you get that renewal, you actually shop around to make sure you've got the best price for the best level of cover for your family? So you can probably save, a couple of $100 or, $50 a month, $20 a month, whatever it is, it's money in your pocket, okay? And you can redeploy that to your emergency fund. Personal insurance is such a life, like your life insurances. You always need to review them as your life changes. Maybe you had insurances for when your kids were younger and you're quite highly insured, but your life is a little bit easier now because your kids are at high school, your kids are in uni. Can you cut back and save on your premiums there to fit to what you want? And in the other one, is your insurance adequate and are you covering your family properly? The other one is shopping your interest rates. I think there's been some actual statistics that show that quite a few Queenslanders haven't actually shopped around to see whether there's a better rate because we're just complacent. We just stick with the provider because it's easier. If you've got an interest rate that's above 3% at the moment, then maybe you should be shopping around. And those funds that you can save by not having to pay as high a mortgage repayment, you can put towards your emergency fund. We're talking about credit cards as well, personal loans, making sure you're getting the best interest rate for you because it's all money in your pocket. The next part is all about building good habits. So reducing your food bill. The key to reducing your food bill is planning. So putting meal planning. I know it sounds boring, but it is a real big key to being able to control your food cost. Plan your meals out. When it gets to Wednesday and you've got sausages on the list, eat the sausages, even if you don't feel like it. Keep your Uber Eats to once a month. And if you can keep your food spend to a certain point and reduce it, so say your food spend's $250 a week and you bring it down to $200 a week, redeploy that $50 a week to your emergency fund, and you can find that it can build up quite quickly. As I've said before, cutting down, not cutting out. Make sure you put in the fund to your budget because that will keep you moving along and you won't feel like you're missing out. It won't feel like a chore because you're still getting those bits and pieces that are part of your happiness. Realize when your emotions are actually spending your money, especially as COVID, has changed things and we're at home a lot more and we're not allowed to go to all the places that we usually were going to. Recognize when your emotions are spending your money. We spend money when we're lonely, we spend money when we're sad, we spend money to make other people happy. So realize when we're doing that and see whether it aligns with what your actual goals are and the bigger picture that you want to build for yourself, which is having that emergency fund so you have that safety net. The third bit is the most important bit, I believe. These are all habits and these are all things you can do, but you need to build your resilience. And part of that is recognizing your apathy. Recognizing when you say, yeah, I know what I want to do, but I just don't do it. You can listen to as many of these webinars as you want. You can read as many books about budgeting, but unless you take action and put some steps into place, nothing will change. Now, I'm not saying you need to do every single one of these things, but you might want to do one a month and see what difference it actually makes. Put it onto a checklist and do it. The next bit is persevering. So if you don't get it right one month and you put more money on the credit card than you intended, or you eat out a bit more, don't give up. Start again the next day, the next month, the next week. Get back on track and persevere. Now, if you've done all these steps and you still feel overwhelmed or it's not working, it might be time to actually seek help. You might want to access the National Debt Helpline, some financial counselling, and get some outside help to figure out what you need to do to get your finances on track, because you're not alone and there is a lot of resources out there to help you. So that's a big picture on some good steps that you can do, some good steps that you can get control of your money. But let's talk about where else you can find help. Right here is where you can find help, on our Financial Wellbeing Hub. Now there's checklists on here that are on the theme that I'm talking about. So checklists to get control of your debt, checklists to get control of your spending and budgets. Download them and go through them once a month. We're there for resources. We've got great articles on where you can find help, what you can do, some common themes on families, apps around apps for financial management, safe banking, and around super as well. We've also got our next webinar that's going to be coming up, which is all about getting control of your debt, which probably would be the next big step that you want to go on after building your first $1,000 of emergency fund for 3 to 6 months as well. So that brings us to the end of our actual webinar. So we're going to go through to questions now. So give you a good 10 minutes to answer any questions that might be on your mind.
Thank you, Jess. I really love that pledge. It keeps us all on track, doesn't it? And it makes us make that commitment to actually starting a new habit or starting something new. So I really did enjoy that pledge. Now, I know I recently shopped around for my electricity rates because when we started building this webinar, I thought, oh, I've been putting that on the to-do list for too long. And I was really shocked at how much we can actually save. So I agree with you, Jess. Get out there and get those savings in your own pocket instead of the big companies. Now, we do have some questions flying through, but if you've left it till the end of this webinar, it's not too late to ask your question. Please go to the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen. I have made a couple of them go live, and yeah, as they're coming through, we'll continue to make them go live. Now, Jess, the first question that did come through is, how do you track your figures? So you put up there on the pledge that you needed to do all those bills, but how do you track all these figures?
Well, it really depends on how you like to see your information. So you might get a green book from I know, what's your green book that you have, Esther? You have this great book that you and your family do?
I do. It's just a standard old accounting ledger, and I prefer the green one just because it has more columns and a fatter bit to write in. Yep. But it's just called a general ledger.
Yeah, so Esther's family does a general ledger because they like to write it down, see it, be able to change it. So you might want to get one of those books where you can write down what your bill is, how much was it this quarter, and then have a look at. So if you reduce your usage and you saw your bill there, you get your next bill and you can see, well, our reduced usage actually made a saving of $25 this quarter. So you can see that your habits are actually changing. So it's about getting a spreadsheet out. So there's a website called Money Smart, which has a heap of resources around spreadsheets and those type of things. And we link to a lot of those resources. They have a budget spreadsheet there, which lets you be able to set your budget yearly, monthly, fortnightly, weekly. So that's a good way to actually track your expenses. You could just do it pen and paper if you really wanted to, or you might want to download an app which can help you set some parameters around your budget. So you've got apps like Money Brilliant, you've got Frollo, you've got Pocketbook. You've got so many options out there for apps, and we've also got an article on the Financial Wellbeing app which shows you a few different options for there. So you can track it. It really depends on how you like to track it and how you think it's a tool that you're actually going to work with.
So you've just answered the next question that came through from Adam, and is there a good app for budgeting and cash flow monitoring? So thanks for answering that question already. I'll also pop on here into the Q&A website where you can find that article that Jess was just mentioning. Now, we do have a sole trader on the line, and they're wondering, money is quite tight for them right now. What tips do you have for sole traders? And I'm not sure, but I would be thinking similar to any, we're all sole traders to some degree, aren't we?
Yeah, so with sole traders, income's high, income's low, income's high, income's low. So you really need to be smart with how you choose it. So when you have your good months, you need to start saving for those bad months so that you can balance it out a bit longer. So when you have those higher income months, think about saving those extra funds to buffer up those months that aren't so good. It's also about, if you're struggling with money, the first step is to try and cut back and go to an essentials budget maybe. So if it's really, really tight, you really need to do that step of reviewing your spending and making sure you're making every dollar count so that you can kind of smooth out those dips and ebbs and flows. Also, if money is tight and you've been impacted by COVID, reach out to your companies that you have accounts with, so your banks, your electricity bills, your insurers, and see what options they can give you if you're going through a bit of hardship. So can you do a premium pause? Can you reduce a bill or delay a payment to when you know that you're going to have a good month? Take control of it and actually talk to the organisations that you have accounts with to see if they can help you, because you don't have to do it on your own, and everyone knows that people are going through these times. So take advantage of that. Make the calls and do it for yourself.
Great answer, thank you. This is a good one that lots of us go through, in fact. Do you have any tips for getting your family or your partner on board with sticking to a budget? My partner is a bit too happy to spend money on Uber Eats, even when we've got food in the fridge.
I think it is, and the thing is that if you can all get on board, then it's much easier to make it happen, because you're not nagging and there's no arguments. But what it's all about is actually sitting around the table and talking about what your goals and priorities are, and making their goals part of what your goals as well. So you might have an idea in mind of what you want, but you still need to have some balance about what they want as well. So if Uber Eats is important to him, then yep, you need to put it into the budget, but he needs to understand that it can't be every week or every month, because we need to think about these other areas where we can be more financially secure. And an emergency fund will last a lot longer than Thai one night, that's for sure. So it is about making sure that everyone's comfortable and has their say in the budget as well. So making it fun for him as well as for yourself as well. So you don't always feel like you're the one saying no, 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 no. You agreeing to it. And you said, well, look, we put this into the budget. You agreed to it. Can we try and stick to it?
Great answer. And last question that's come through is, what if I'm paying off my credit card each month? Is it still a problem? And what does spending mindfully mean?
Okay, so what if I'm paying my credit card?
Yeah, so part one to the question is, what if I'm paying off my credit card each month? Is this still a problem?
Oh, well, I suppose there's all sorts of ways. So it really depends on how you've got it set up. Some people have a budget where they put all their expenses onto the credit card each month to get points or to link up to their mortgage or something like that, but they're not carrying that debt across each month. So they're paying it out in full and paying on their credit card. But if you were to be doing both, so spending your money and putting it on the credit card, then that's where the problem occurs. It's up to you the way that you do it, but if you're carrying a debt and that debt is getting bigger or out of control, or you're having to put all of your money onto your credit card because you've spent it so much and you're not able to save, that's when it's a problem. So if you're paying off your credit card as just as your normal expenses, then that's okay, a strategy. But if you're putting all of your money onto the credit card and you're not able to meet other goals, or you're spending too much, that's where the problem lies, is that you're not able to meet other goals. So have a look at that. Are you doing that? Spending mindfully is exactly that. Stopping and thinking about your goals. So before you go and tap and go, after you've gone to buy the one thing that you're going to buy, so let's say, I'll give you an example. It sounds a very girly example, but I go to Mecca and I know that I like one foundation and I'm going there to buy that, and that's part of my budget. And then I get up to the counter and I see all the pretty things and I start picking them up. Oh, that's only $18. Oh, that's only $20. And then I get to the counter and my $50 spend is now $110. That's what I'm talking about. I need to be more mindful and go, no, I didn't come here for this. I don't want that extra money out of my budget, and I put it back. So I mindfully spend and don't just do it out of not even thinking about it.
Great answer there, Jess. Now we have come to the end of our webinar. So we're currently sitting at 12:28. So we've got a couple of minutes left just in case anyone else wishes to answer, send through a question. But if not, oh, actually, one more just came through, Jess. What's your recommendation to stay motivated on this budget? Because I hate budgets.
Motivation doesn't exist. It is discipline. So yep, at the start we can feel really energized about it. It's a new thing. It's got a novelty to it. And that's where that mastering my spending pledge comes into it. It is about perseverance. Your motivation will go up and down and you won't get it right every month. But your motivation has got to come, it's got to go past motivation. It's got to go past and thinking about those bigger goals. So if you can try and keep the fun in your budget, that's where you can kind of get a bit more motivation and not feel like you're denying yourself stuff, but you're also working to other goals. So you've got to think past motivation, because that will wane. Your initial enthusiasm will go, but it's all about persevering, doing those extra steps. And when you have a bad month, choosing to get back on it and moving forward, not punishing yourself and not making your, non-compliance to budget last 6 months, So if you can kind of, if you go off the track and it only lasts 2 weeks, instead of 6 months, then that's a better result. You're not going to get it perfect every time, but the quicker you can get back on track, the more motivated you can be. But it is about self-discipline, it is about persevering, and it is about behaviours.
Great answer, thank you. We have come to the end of our webinar now at 12:30, so I'd just like to remind everyone that you can get more information and some of those checklists that Jess mentioned on our financial wellbeing website. We have kept that up on the screen so that you can write it down. And I'd also like to remind everyone of our next webinar that's coming up in September, and it is on paying down debt. We're giving you some great strategies and tips on how to attack those credit cards and those debts that might be lying around and that are niggling away at you and you want to get rid of. So if there's something that interests you, please go to that website and register for that next webinar, which is in September. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you logging in and taking some time to make your own financial wellbeing that important step in your life. And I'd like to also thank Jess for her really informative presentation today and taking us on this journey on how to create that safety net within our budget. So again, thanks Jess, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Before we do go, you are going to be receiving a feedback email on this one. Where
thanks, Jess.
Yes, thank you. That's why we're a good dream team here, Esther. Feedback email. We want to hear what you think. So please take the time to fill it out, because we're doing this for you to be able to build your financial capability and be topics that are interesting to members and Greater Queensland. Please fill out that feedback form. Tell us what you think. Tell us the topics that you're wanting to hear about, and then we can build this for you. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.